Jack Lemmon's journey through Hollywood is a mosaic of comedic brilliance, earnest vulnerability, and a relentless pursuit of excellence, fueled partly by an immense love for performing and partly by the demons he kept under wraps for much of his life. Even before he made his name in the industry, he was shaping the comedic sensibilities that would later enthrall audiences. From a shockingly premature birth in a Boston area hospital elevator to his final days as an aging legend of the silver screen, Lemmon showed a distinctive blend of charm, humility, and sometimes heartbreaking candor. His life was never a simplistic fairy tale, but rather a story of ups and downs, of comedic genius and hidden sorrows, all converging into one of the most endearing personalities in 20th century film. And through it all, he remained a figure that radiated an abiding passion for acting, a passion that would lead him to comedic classics, dramatic triumphs, and every heartfelt performance in between. He entered this world in a rather cinematic fashion on February 8, 1925, in Newton, Massachusetts. Legend has it that his mother, Millie, so committed to her weekly bridge game, tried to hold off the birth until she had finished socializing with her friends. The baby refused to wait any longer. By the time she reached Newton Wellesley Hospital, her son John Euler Lemmon III appeared right there in the elevator. Premature, jaundiced, and born in the most unceremonious place possible, he came into the world 2 months early. One of the attending nurses, noticing his yellowish complexion, quipped, "Look at the little yellow lemon," which probably didn't amuse Millie at that moment. However, that unassuming start would, in time, become a fitting origin for a man who often balanced comedic charm with an undercurrent of pathos. His family was one of outward respectability. His father, John Jr., excelled in business as a traveling executive in the baking equipment industry, and his mother had grown up amid aristocratic circles in Baltimore. In her younger years, Millie had lived in a sumptuous mansion complete with servants, enjoying the glamorous world that genteel society could offer. But there was a less polished side hidden under that veneer. Both of Millie's parents had been heavy drinkers, and she too developed a fondness for alcohol, a pattern that would weave itself into Jack's life and eventually echo in his own struggles. Though John Jr. and Millie tried to maintain a conventional marriage and create an idyllic childhood for their only son, they never established the warm parental closeness that might have anchored him more securely. Millie wasn't a naturally maternal figure. She liked the social scene, the cocktails, and the flash of Boston nightlife. John Jr. was quieter, yet stood over 6 feet tall, exuding a kind of steady confidence that shy young Jack felt he lacked. As a child, Jack's early health was far from robust. He was plagued by scarlet fever, measles, and numerous other ailments. His adenoids were removed multiple times. This fragility, combined with the uneasy tension at home, where his parents eventually retreated to separate bedrooms, helped nudge him toward humor as a tool for coping. Being funny softened the sharp edges of any conflict, and it helped him contend with a sense that the family structure was precarious. Still, Jack was not solely about being the clown. He proved to be a resourceful and quick-witted kid, an observer of people, eager to please or diffuse a tense situation. When it came to formal education, John Jr. wanted his son to have the very best. This led to Jack attending Rivers Country Day School, where he began dabbling in theater and school plays. Though his academic performance was unremarkable, he developed a burgeoning affection for the stage, and over time, that attraction grew stronger. John Jr. later enrolled him at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, an elite preparatory school that was famous for molding the children of affluent families. It took time for Jack to adjust to boarding school life. Introverted and physically small, he often felt overshadowed by more outgoing classmates, but he found ways to shine in theatrical productions and in music where he taught himself piano, a skill he would use to unwind and entertain friends for decades to come. Eventually, his parents' strained marriage broke completely, and though they never divorced, John Jr. was Catholic. They separated and lived apart. This ended the long-standing facade that they were a happy household, but it did little to soothe Jack's persistent sense of uncertainty. Despite these challenges, he proceeded to Harvard University, entering with a condition that he joined the Navy's ROTC program during World War II. If the Navy authorities expected an ideal officer, however, they would have found Lemmon a curious fit. He handled his duties diligently, but ended up with fairly mundane assignments, spending time as a decoding officer and overseeing a motor pool. Once he gained enough points for an honorable discharge, he unceremoniously bowed out, returning to Harvard for a final semester. Throughout his college years, performing remained an obsession. He joined extracurricular groups, such as the Hasty Pudding Club, to continue refining his comedic timing and stage presence. But the real stage for any aspiring actor in the mid-1940s was New York City. With his father's grudging support and a small loan, Jack headed to the Big Apple. Times were tough, parts were scarce, and more than once he struggled to pay his rent. Yet slowly he carved out a niche, finding work on radio, television, and eventually on stage. In 1949, he got a brief, nearly invisible spot in a Warner Brothers film called The Lady Takes a Sailor, directed by Michael Curtis. He was so far down the ladder that his name didn't appear in the credits, and his role is memorable only for having been the earliest evidence of his presence in a Hollywood film. Television, then on the rise, turned out to be a more promising avenue for him. He joined the cast of shows like Robert Montgomery Presents and Studio One, honing his comedic instincts, discovering new ways to connect to an audience. Here he met fellow performer Cynthia Stone, who became not only his colleague, but also his first wife in 1950. Their partnership in front of the camera was overshadowed by the drama that took place off-screen. Millie, Jack's mother, nearly missed their wedding after accidentally leaving a gas stove on one night and nearly suffocating herself. Though she survived, her heavy drinking was an ominous sign of hardships to come, hinting at a pattern Jack himself would eventually follow. He and Cynthia had a son, Chris, but the couple's union did not last. They divorced in 1956. Jack later concluded that stretching out an unhappy marriage for too long was more damaging than simply ending it. Meanwhile, his screen presence was finding new footing. In 1954, he landed a leading role in It Should Happen to You, directed by George Cukor, famed for his sophisticated comedies. This was Jack's first taste of real cinematic notice, a modestly budgeted film that punched above its weight and earned him strong reviews. After a string of small parts on stage, including a Broadway disaster that closed within 2 weeks, he was spotted by a talent scout who raved about his comedic potential. Harry Cohn at Columbia Pictures liked what he heard and promptly offered Lemmon a 7-year contract, an extraordinary display of faith for a relative newcomer. Though Jack didn't love being tied down to one studio, this contract was more liberal than most, allowing him to work at other studios under certain conditions. His initial roles at Columbia ranged from breezy romps to somewhat more substantial fare, but it took a while for audiences to realize that behind the easy grin and nimble comedic delivery, Lemmon was a real talent. In 1955, he scored a breakout with the John Ford film Mr. Roberts, playing the amiable but slightly cowardly officer, Ensign Pulver. Ford himself had a fearsome reputation. He socked leading man Henry Fonda in the jaw at one point, and Lemmon later recalled not even recognizing the venerable director when first approached about the part. Despite the backstage battles, the film turned out a success, and Lemmon earned an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. This was no minor achievement for someone so recently considered unproven in Hollywood circles. Not long after, Lemmon's comedic style blossomed in lighter fare, like You Can't Run Away From It. Yet it was Billy Wilder, the brilliant Austrian-born writer and director, who would elevate him to comedic immortality. Some Like It Hot, 1959, stands among cinema's greatest comedies, and Lemmon's portrayal of Jerry, a down-on-his-luck musician who masquerades as a woman to elude mobsters, remains iconic. Wilder had originally wanted Jerry Lewis for the part, but Lewis famously declined. Lemmon accepted enthusiastically, alongside Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe. The film's madcap spirit, sizzling lines, and comedic gender bending have since become legend. Lemmon, with his deft physical comedy and gift for comedic timing, more than kept pace with his glamorous castmates. He also supplied a sense of genuine warmth, particularly in the scenes where his disguised character unexpectedly finds himself engaged to a smitten millionaire. That goofy grin behind the wig and dress would become part of Hollywood history. While Some Like It Hot earned Lemmon an Oscar nomination, he went on to another Wilder triumph, The Apartment, 1960. Co-starring Shirley MacLaine, the film used a comedic premise. An office drone allows his bosses to use his apartment for extramarital trysts as a gateway to biting commentary on corporate life and moral compromises. Under Wilder's direction, Lemmon balanced sweetness, heartbreak, and a comedic sense of exasperation, forging an everyman figure that audiences found irresistible. The Apartment swept the major categories at the Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Wilder, while Lemmon and MacLaine picked up their own nominations. It was a sign of just how well Lemmon's brand of comedic sincerity, given dimension by vulnerability and frustration, resonated with critics and viewers alike. Yet comedic brilliance alone did not define him. In 1962, Blake Edwards directed Days of Wine and Roses, a film that delved into the agony of alcoholism. Lemmon played Joe Clay, an advertising man who slides into the destructive cycle of addiction, together with his wife, Lee Remick. The roles were profoundly affecting, and Lemmon's depiction of a man unraveling under the grip of alcohol shattered the carefree comedic image that might have typecast him. The intensity of the scene in which he's strapped into a straitjacket in the sanitarium, screaming so vehemently that he couldn't immediately break character when the director called cut, remains a milestone of cinematic heartbreak. The performance earned him another Academy Award nomination and foreshadowed his own off-screen struggles with drinking. This film was more than a job for Jack. It was a mirror he found almost too uncomfortable to look into, but it attested to his willingness to push himself into territories of fear and raw pain for the sake of authentic artistry. By that same year, Lemmon had found love again, marrying actress Felicia Farr. They met while filming Irma la Douce, 1963, another reunion with Wilder and co-star Shirley MacLaine. Although Irma la Douce was lighter and less groundbreaking than Some Like It Hot or The Apartment, it proved to be another box office success. Off-screen, Lemmon's marriage to Farr brought him a measure of stability, and together they had a daughter, Courtney. Through professional highs and lows, that family anchor became a comforting force he had lacked in earlier years. The mid-1960s saw him lean even more into comedic roles like Under the Yum Yum Tree, Good Neighbor Sam, and How to Murder Your Wife. Each drew upon his affable persona, though occasionally spiced with a slightly more aggressive or sarcastic edge. He racked up more award nominations, picking up Golden Globe and BAFTA nods, as audiences and producers alike adored him in these energetic, feel-good movies. Yet behind that beaming grin, Lemmon was carrying heartbreak, most painfully the passing of his mother Millie. She had never conquered her drinking and died alone in her chair, dressed for an outing with Jack. The moment he broke down her door and discovered her, silent and still, became one of the great private agonies of his life. In typical Lemmon style, he threw himself deeper into work to wrestle with the grief. A major pivot arrived in 1966 when Lemmon teamed up with Walter Matthau for The Fortune Cookie. Matthau, 5 years older, had been a character actor leaning toward rough-edged or morally ambiguous parts, but together with Lemmon, they shared a pitch-perfect dynamic that would spawn multiple comedic classics. Matthau played Willie Gingrich, an unscrupulous attorney who convinces Lemmon's mild, morally upright cameraman to fake severe injuries for a big insurance payout. The comedic engine was the contrast between Mathau's brash cynicism and Lemmon's all-too-decent nature, manipulated but never truly corrupted. The film gave Matthau an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, setting in motion one of Hollywood's most beloved duos. They re-teamed in The Odd Couple, 1968, perhaps the quintessential buddy comedy, adapted from Neil Simon's stage play. Lemmon took on the neat freak Felix, while Matthau reprised Oscar Madison, a laid-back sports writer. The two men's interactions resembled a comedic fireworks display. The more polar their personalities, the more comedic sparks they generated. Felix's borderline hysteria clashed spectacularly with Oscar's messy, easygoing approach to life. But beneath the comedic chaos was a testament to male friendship, an acknowledgement that two wildly different individuals could rely on one another, no matter their quarrels. Even as the film soared at the box office, it also hinted at deeper reflections on divorce, masculinity, and middle-aged loneliness. Felix and Oscar's slovenly neat freak dynamic was comedic gold, and it remained relevant for years. Lemmon explored that same comedic vein with The Out-of-Towners, 1970, also written by Neil Simon. This time, he starred with Sandy Dennis as a Midwestern couple navigating a nightmarish trip to New York City. Jack Lemmon's journey through Hollywood is a mosaic of comedic brilliance, earnest vulnerability, and a relentless pursuit of excellence, fueled partly by an immense love for performing and partly by the demons he kept under wraps for much of his life. Even before he made his name in the industry, he was shaping the comedic sensibilities that would later enthrall audiences. From a shockingly premature birth in a Boston area hospital elevator to his final days as an aging legend of the silver screen, Lemmon showed a distinctive blend of charm, humility, and sometimes heartbreaking candor. His life was never a simplistic fairy tale, but rather a story of ups and downs, of comedic genius and hidden sorrows, all converging into one of the most endearing personalities in 20th century film. And through it all, he remained a figure that radiated an abiding passion for acting, a passion that would lead him to comedic classics, dramatic triumphs, and every heartfelt performance in between. He entered this world in a rather cinematic fashion on February 8, 1925, in Newton, Massachusetts. Legend has it that his mother, Millie, so committed to her weekly bridge game, tried to hold off the birth until she had finished socializing with her friends. The baby refused to wait any longer. By the time she reached Newton Wellesley Hospital, her son John Euler Lemmon III appeared right there in the elevator. Premature, jaundiced, and born in the most unceremonious place possible, he came into the world 2 months early. One of the attending nurses, noticing his yellowish complexion, quipped, "Look at the little yellow lemon," which probably didn't amuse Millie at that moment. However, that unassuming start would, in time, become a fitting origin for a man who often balanced comedic charm with an undercurrent of pathos. His family was one of outward respectability. His father, John Jr., excelled in business as a traveling executive in the baking equipment industry, and his mother had grown up amid aristocratic circles in Baltimore. In her younger years, Millie had lived in a sumptuous mansion complete with servants, enjoying the glamorous world that genteel society could offer. But there was a less polished side hidden under that veneer. Both of Millie's parents had been heavy drinkers, and she too developed a fondness for alcohol, a pattern that would weave itself into Jack's life and eventually echo in his own struggles. Though John Jr. and Millie tried to maintain a conventional marriage and create an idyllic childhood for their only son, they never established the warm parental closeness that might have anchored him more securely. Millie wasn't a naturally maternal figure. She liked the social scene, the cocktails, and the flash of Boston nightlife. John Jr. was quieter, yet stood over 6 feet tall, exuding a kind of steady confidence that shy young Jack felt he lacked. As a child, Jack's early health was far from robust. He was plagued by scarlet fever, measles, and numerous other ailments. His adenoids were removed multiple times. This fragility, combined with the uneasy tension at home, where his parents eventually retreated to separate bedrooms, helped nudge him toward humor as a tool for coping. Being funny softened the sharp edges of any conflict, and it helped him contend with a sense that the family structure was precarious. Still, Jack was not solely about being the clown. He proved to be a resourceful and quick-witted kid, an observer of people, eager to please or diffuse a tense situation. When it came to formal education, John Jr. wanted his son to have the very best. This led to Jack attending Rivers Country Day School, where he began dabbling in theater and school plays. Though his academic performance was unremarkable, he developed a burgeoning affection for the stage, and over time, that attraction grew stronger. John Jr. later enrolled him at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, an elite preparatory school that was famous for molding the children of affluent families. It took time for Jack to adjust to boarding school life. Introverted and physically small, he often felt overshadowed by more outgoing classmates. But he found ways to shine in theatrical productions and in music, where he taught himself piano, a skill he would use to unwind and entertain friends for decades to come. Eventually, his parents' strained marriage broke completely, and though they never divorced, John Jr. was Catholic. They separated and lived apart. This ended the long-standing facade that they were a happy household, but it did little to soothe Jack's persistent sense of uncertainty. Despite these challenges, he proceeded to Harvard University, entering with a condition that he joined the Navy's ROTC program during World War II. He dipped into reflective stories, exploring familial bonds, aging, and personal crises like That's Life, 1986, and Dad, 1989. Neither was a runaway critical or commercial smash, but they offered a thoughtful meditation on the passage of time, the complexities of growing older, and holding one's family close before it's too late. Lemmon, now in his 60s, embraced characters who grappled with regret, doubts, and a yearning for genuine closeness. In the early 1990s, he jumped into ensemble casts for Robert Altman's The Player and Shortcuts, cameo roles that allowed him a bit of sardonic wit and droll humor, attributes that fit Altman's style. JFK, 1991, Oliver Stone's ambitious film about the Kennedy assassination, gave him a small part as a private investigator, uniting him once more with Walter Matthau, who also made a cameo. Though these films weren't anchored by Lemmon, they benefited from the gravitas he brought just by showing up on screen. He was hardly done with lead roles, however. Glengarry Glen Ross, 1992, proved a striking platform for his skill. Adapted from David Mamet's Pulitzer-winning play, the film depicts the brutal competition among real estate salesmen. Surrounded by Al Pacino, Kevin Spacey, and Alec Baldwin, Lemmon created Shelley the Machine, Levine, a once successful salesman now caught in a humiliating downward spiral. Mamet's rat-a-tat dialogue, with all its expletives and naked desperation, gave Lemmon the chance to conjure not just comedic frustration, but genuine heartbreak at a man losing his dignity. The performance was widely praised, often singled out even in a cast of heavyweights. If Glengarry Glen Ross took him into a harshly modern, cynical realm, he pivoted not long after to pure audience-pleasing entertainment. Grumpy Old Men, 1993, marked the return of the beloved Lemmon-Matthau duo. The premise was lighthearted. Two elderly next-door neighbors in Minnesota who have spent decades bickering and pranking each other, now competing for the affections of a charming newcomer. That comedic back and forth, culminating in ice-fishing disasters, romantic confusions, and gentle mockery of seniorhood, was exactly what audiences craved. Younger viewers found they could enjoy the pairing of these comedic veterans, even without having seen their heyday in the 1960s, while older fans adored the nostalgic synergy. The film's success prompted Grumpier Old Men, 1995, which introduced Sophia Loren as Mathau's love interest. Critics were lukewarm, but viewers turned it into a box office hit, reminding the industry that comedic chemistry, if done right, never truly goes stale. That same pattern of returning to a comedic goldmine led to The Odd Couple de Seine in 1998. Though predictably it didn't capture the original film's magic, it still allowed Lemmon and Matthau to riff on their natural comedic tension one more time, now portrayed through senior citizen versions of Felix and Oscar. Fans appreciated seeing these dear old friends on screen, even if the script fell short of the witty heights of the 1960s. During those twilight years, Lemmon contributed a regal cameo performance as Marcellus in Kenneth Branagh's 1996 adaptation of Hamlet, and he also narrated The Legend of Bagger Vance, 2000, which would be his last film credit. One of his final most applauded TV roles was in the 1997 remake of 12 Angry Men. He portrayed Juror Number 8, a role originally defined by Henry Fonda in the classic 1957 film. Lemmon's deeply compassionate, morally firm turn earned him a Golden Globe nomination. In a memorable awards moment, Ving Rhames, who won that year, felt Lemmon deserved the honor more and tried to hand over the trophy, a poignant gesture that demonstrated how beloved Jack was by his peers. By the late 90s, Lemmon was at last admitting publicly that he had wrestled with alcohol for decades. It had humiliated him in 1974 during that notorious award presentation to James Cagney, and again in 1976 when he was arrested for drunk driving. Although he had addressed it privately over the years, he finally laid the truth bare in interviews, encouraging others to confront their own struggles if they felt they had a problem. Around 1999, he faced an even bigger battle, colon and bladder cancer. The seriousness of his illness remained mostly private, though he was quietly aware that his time could be drawing to a close. He died on June 27, 2001, at the age of 76. In a fitting final tribute to a partnership that had so defined his screen life, Lemmon's resting place lies near that of Walter Matthau, who had died the previous year. Even in death, their closeness persisted, symbolic of a friendship that transcended the many comedic roles in which they'd sparred, teased, cajoled, and ultimately supported each other. "I have lost someone I loved as a brother," Lemmon said at the time of Mathau's death, a public reflection of the depth of their off-screen bond. Though so many fans remember Lemmon primarily for comedic romps and the breezy air of a man always on the verge of a wide grin, to confine him to that box would be to lose half the story. His comedic timing, particularly under the guidance of Billy Wilder, was second to none, and those roles established him as a household name. At the same time, it was his capacity to explore his anxieties, disappointments, and regrets that elevated him to a greater dramatic plane. From the haunted alcoholic in Days of Wine and Roses to the morally conflicted businessman in Save the Tiger, he demonstrated again and again that real comedic power is rooted in heartbreak and doubt. It's that precarious balance that gave him the capacity to connect with anyone, whether they were corporate ladder climbers, discouraged salesmen, or comedic cross-dressers just trying to survive. Yet amid the accolades, 2 Oscars, 1 for supporting actor, 1 for lead, multiple Golden Globes, BAFTAs, and countless nominations, he never seemed to develop the swagger of a typical Hollywood star. One gets the sense he always remained slightly astonished that he'd come so far. He was a man who described himself as shy, overshadowed by a tall, successful father, and he was deeply pained by the unraveling of his parents' marriage and his mother's self-destructive relationship with alcohol. He discovered early in life that laughter could protect him and maybe help hold the harshness of the world at bay. And across the decades, he continued to cultivate that comedic persona, even as he valiantly confronted heavier, more dramatic roles. Work was a buoy for him, a life raft that kept him from sinking under the pressures of heartbreak, regret, and addiction. In that sense, Lemmon embodied the classic image of the funny man with a shadow lurking underneath, just as so many comedic actors do. It was that vulnerability that lent his comedic characters a sweetness and his dramatic characters a quiet, devastating realness. You can watch him in The Apartment and see a man who might be goofily brushing his hat or fiddling with his key, but inside there's a heartbreak that flickers in his eyes. Similarly, in Missing, he wears the face of a man growing furious and frightened at the realization that the powers he trusted have betrayed him. In Days of Wine and Roses, he is powerless to stop the wheels of self-destruction from turning. No matter the context, he had that combination of comic timing and emotional truth, which is probably why audiences return to him again and again, decade after decade. One should not forget that behind the screen's illusions, behind the raucous on-set laughter, Lemmon had a painfully honest awareness of his own failings, especially regarding his alcohol dependency. He had almost lost control multiple times, including that extremely public fiasco in front of millions of viewers. But eventually, he tackled the issue head-on, and in his final decades, he demonstrated a kind of sober determination to funnel the lessons of his past into better choices. Even if this personal victory never received the kind of public fanfare his comedic achievements did, it was a testament to his resilience. In looking at his personal relationships, none stands out quite like his friendship with Walter Matthau. They were a perfect match of contrasting styles. Lemmon was quick, youthful, often exasperated or anxious. Matthau played the disheveled cynic, content to slouch his way through life. Together, they redefined the buddy comedy for multiple generations. Although The Odd Couple is the best-known artifact of that partnership, it was The Fortune Cookie, The Front Page, Grumpy Old Men, and so many more that showcase their evolving comedic synergy. Through it all, they bantered not just on screen, but in interviews and even in personal gatherings. Though only they knew the full extent of their off-screen closeness, the tributes each made to the other toward the end of their lives left no doubt it was a bond of real affection and appreciation. After Matthau died, Lemmon was in visibly poor spirits, describing the loss as if it were the departure of a family member. When Lemmon's time came the following year, it was as if the era of their comedic duo had closed its final curtain. If there is any single theme that explains Lemmon's universal appeal, it may be authenticity. Even at his most madcap and theatrical, he came across as profoundly genuine. Viewers felt they saw the real Jack Lemmon, not a phony facade. Maybe this resonated because people sensed that behind the comedic veneer was a man grappling with love, heartbreak, bitterness, a complicated childhood, uneasy self-esteem, and ultimately a thirst for self-improvement. This is the very stuff of human life. Or maybe it's the sense that Jack always seemed to be working just as hard as the audience, never resting on star power, never lapsing into complacency, and always pushing to do something surprising. One sees that impetus in the comedic drag routine in Some Like It Hot, in the bleak meltdown scenes of Days of Wine and Roses, in the moral anguish of Missing, and in the wisecracking banter of Grumpy Old Men. He was simultaneously us, a reflection of our foibles, and a sort of bright, guiding light of comedic timing. Even his lesser celebrated roles still hold up because of that unwavering sincerity. You might not find Avanti or Under the Yum Yum Tree topping many best of lists, but watch him in any scene, and his focus remains unwavering, his comedic instincts intact. The perfect comedic reaction might be a subtle twitch in the eye, a fleeting facial contortion that says volumes about the character's exasperation, or a sudden gusto that stands out from the more subdued comedic styles of earlier Hollywood. He used those comedic strategies not as cheap gags, but as revelations of human nature, exposing the insecurities, pettiness, and small joys that define us all. Ultimately, Jack Lemmon left us with an extraordinary body of work. From his earliest cameo to the final cameo in The Legend of Bagger Vance, he never turned in a performance half-heartedly. Whether clothed in comedic confusion or in somber reflection, he found the deeper truths, sometimes at great emotional cost. For that, he remains one of the most universally beloved figures of 20th century cinema, a man who represented the comedic brilliance of a bygone Hollywood era, but who also embraced the gritty realism of the modern age. Perhaps it's fitting that Lemmon was literally born in motion, in that elevator that never reached its intended floor before he entered the world. He spent the rest of his life constantly moving, constantly searching for the next great performance, and constantly trying to reconcile the outward comedic persona with the storms swirling inside. The same resolute spirit that led his mother to delay going to the hospital for a bridge game was reflected in his refusal to let personal failure cripple his career. Instead, he allowed vulnerability to flood his characters and shape his comedic style. That nuance, that mixture of heartbreak and buoyant charm, was the impetus for some of Hollywood's greatest comedic moments, and it was also the soul of his heartfelt dramatic roles. To watch Jack Lemmon is to laugh and sometimes tear up at how painfully real he could make any role seem. He was the quintessential American everyman, but with uncommon skill and rare comedic genius. Even when overshadowed by imposing co-stars or overshadowed by personal misfortune, he managed to produce performances that soared. His comedic gift turned out to be rooted in empathy as much as in timing. He understood how fragile people really are, how quickly we can stumble, and how sometimes the best medicine for heartbreak is a laugh, even if it's tinged with bitterness. In the end, Lemmon's life proved that stardom doesn't have to be built on hollow bravado. He was approachable, flawed, and open-hearted, forging a connection with audiences that never faded. As a friend and co-star to Walter Matthau, he made comedic history. As a collaborator with Billy Wilder, he delivered comedic and dramatic high points that still define the golden age of American film. As a father and husband, he sought to be present in ways his own parents never fully were. As a performer, he worked tirelessly, like a demon, as friends often said, to capture the precise blend of comedic exuberance and serious acting that made his characters unforgettable. Over the decades, Hollywood has produced countless comedic stars. Many shine briefly, then vanish without leaving a significant imprint on cinematic history. Jack Lemmon was decidedly different. His comedic artistry was shaped by heartbreak, a sense of duty, and a warm, empathetic soul that made him beloved by fellow actors and fans alike. The awards, the box office success, the comedic chemistry, none of those alone can explain why we still love Jack Lemmon's performances. It's something deeper, something intangible that resonates at a personal level. In a film industry that often values shallow glitz, Jack brought the shimmering unpredictability of real life, sometimes joyful, sometimes heartbreaking, often chaotic, always sincere. And so his story stands as both humorous and sobering, just like the man himself. Maybe the greatest tribute we can offer him is to keep watching the roles he left behind, to keep laughing at the zany comedic twists, and to pause in those heartbreaking moments where he reveals something profoundly human.